I have a significant record collection. I have around about 3,000 albums, I would say. Half CDs, half vinyl. Albums that I'm listening to now, I tend to get on CD. It's a little bit easier for me to deal with. I've got a CD player at home. I've got a CD player in my bedroom. I've got a CD player in the car. Vinyl, it's usually like it's a really special album and I want to cherish it. You're right. So then I can sit in bed with Spotify on, but cradling the album, the vinyl album in my arms, pretending that I'm listening to it on vinyl. You know, and having an experience, it's way better than listening to something on CD. That is true. So I have a different criteria. Recently, I've been buying all sorts of albums. My record, my mate rang me up and said, do you want to go to a record fair? I said, no, I've got to stop. I feel like I'm a bloody heroin addict now with this. I'm addicted to it. I'm going to go draw another £100 out, go down the bloody record fair. You know, all goes against tax, I hope. And, you know, and I'm buying bloody everything going. And I thought, I can't do this. And I can't bloody listen to them all. I've had to create a special bloody, it's over there in the background, there's a special bit where I put the records so I can play them. You know, and they're getting full of albums that I don't want to listen to because there's too many albums here. They're just piling up. But within all of this and my realisation that I need to stop buying records, there are records that I am still looking for. These are the holy grail. These are the albums I haven't got that I really want a copy of. Right, I have come up with the 10 albums that are most wanted by me. These are the albums I want. And when I see them, I hope they're not too expensive because I don't like spending a lot of money on records. That's the one thing. So some of you may say, oh, Andy, you can get hold of that really easily. You can, but it's £40, 50. I ain't spending that. No. I'm like a hunter when I go buying records. And the whole point is I've got to get them for a reasonable price. I can't be spending loads of money on stuff. No. So here we have my 10 most wanted albums. Okay? So, shall we get straight in? And I'm now going to angle this very surreptitiously over to the side. So here I can put a graphic of the album up. So you know what I'm talking about using the magic of editing. So at number 10, believe it or not, I really want the original Mahavishnu Orchestra complete Columbia albums collection set. Now this is something they brought back a few years ago. And it niggles me because a student of mine who knew that I love the Mahavishnu Orchestra, he went, oh, you love the Mahavishnu Orchestra? Yeah, I went online and I got a box set for £7. And I thought that I had the box set because I had this box set. And I thought it was that box set. But no, it was this box set. And I said, what's it? And he told me. And he told me that there was 2 versions of Live Between Nothingness and Eternity. Right? In this box set, you get remasters of all the albums. Now, I don't know if I've got remasters of all the albums, so I want that. And I don't know whether my Columbia box set's got remasters. But anyway, it says on these are the remasters. But most importantly, there's a remaster of Between Nothingness and Eternity. And it does sound infinitely better. Me with my curmudgeonly old manness, sometimes I go, yeah, I prefer the one that I grew up with. And I understand all that, but I do want it because I'm a Mahavishnu Orchestra fan, one of the ultimate Mahavishnu Orchestra fans. I want this box set so bad, but then on top of that, it's got a brilliantly mixed, studio production live album additional called the unreleased Live Between Nothingness and Eternity. And this is in here as well. Now, I know this is up on Spotify, I can listen to it every single time. But I want those albums, Between Nothingness and Eternity, as a double album with this selection. This is like as good as it gets because the actual playing on Between Nothingness and Eternity, in terms of the original Mahavishnu Orchestra, is the peak. They're like on fire. I really want, I want the box set, right? So, my mate, said, I got it for £7 on Amazon. And I checked it out. I could have bought it for £7 and I did it. I thought, do I really need this? Because back then, I wasn't listening like I was listening. I didn't have the YouTube. It wasn't like that. So I didn't buy it. So more recently, I thought, I've got to have that Live Between Nothingness and Eternity. So I thought, why haven't they brought this out as a separate double disc album at a reasonable price of say 15, 20 quid so I can buy it with photographs and liner notes? Why haven't they done that? It's bloody obvious. Would you buy it? I would buy it. But no, you've got to get this box set, and of course it's deleted now. And so we're looking like 100 quid to buy this, right? Maybe 70 quid at a push, plus bloody postage and packaging or whatever it is. Right? Now, I know there's people like my student that own a copy of this and they don't bloody care. They don't care. I could say, do you want to swap it for my box set? Well, what's the difference? It's just, you get an extra live album. It's nothing really, Yeah, go then. I'll give you 20 quid or 20. And I know they'd probably swap it for me. They wouldn't know. Wasted on them it is. Wasted. But I need a copy of that. Right? It's enough with all these pretend albums that are coming out, live at Berkeley and all these pretend live albums that are coming out, radio broadcasts and, reasonable bootlegs and stuff like that. I can't go buying it all. Can't, but I need the bloody Between Nothingness and Eternity, especially unreleased ones. And I have to be honest, the idea that they put a blue filter or purple filter over the cover and that is artwork, that's crap. Come on, Columbia. Give us what we want. A great big plush double album of Between Nothingness and Eternity. You've got the rematch. Just put it out, right, and just get a decent bloody artwork on there. That's what I've got at number 10. Right, here's an admission for you. I love Pat Martino. He's actually been very influential on me as a guitarist, educationally. I studied some of his stuff. It's the use of the minor pentatonic as a way of playing 2-5-1s. I was quite influenced by that. I never got anywhere near what he could do. He's a fantastic guitar player, Pat Martino is. Now, Pat Martino was never on my radar because he tends to be in the sort of more straight jazz realm. But in the mid-70s, he made a jazz rock fusion album. It's one of the greatest jazz rock fusion albums ever made. And it's the only jazz rock fusion album that features Pat Martino burning over a jazz rock rhythm section. This album is perfect. They're played out. It sounds great. His soloing is great. It is called Joyous Lake. Now, I do not think, in my experience as a human being, with all the record fairs I've gone to and all the record shops, that I have ever seen this. I don't know, here in the UK, maybe it didn't get a proper release. I don't know anything about it. But Joyous Lake is an album I must have, right? I should own all the great jazz rock fusion albums. That is there's so many I haven't got, but on this list you're going to have a selection of really incredible jazz rock fusion albums, predominantly. I think they virtually all are. There's only one that isn't now after this. This is all jazz rock fusion. When I went on Rick Beato and he says, who's your 5 favourite drummers? And I just came up with 5 jazz rock fusion drummers. That's me. That is me. I need heavy, flying, funky, yet rocky extemporization, right? And they're all here, the ones I haven't got. So, yeah, at number 9, Joyous Lake by Pat Martino. If I was to talk progressive rock, my favourite band would be Yes. Rush, I love Rush. Third, King Crimson. Now, the reason King Crimson aren't not at the top is because all that faffy pap that they did in the early days. And then I snorked after saying faffy pap. I just went faffy pap. And I know I did it. Don't think I didn't notice it. I know I did that. The faffy pap that they brought out, all the sort of bloody... I mean, in the Court of the Crimson King, it's good. It's got some guys. Schizoid Man's great, and then they do it again, don't they? With the next one, and then we get Islands, and I'm not a fan of any of those albums. I've got to be honest. And towards the end, when they were bringing out all these albums, they were okay, but I'd lost interest. So really, for me, King Crimson boils down to those 3 albums that they made in the 70s with Bill Bruford, Red, Stars of the By Look Back, and Lark's Tongues in Aspic, and then the 3 albums they did with Adrian Belew. It's those 6 albums. Thrack, is really good, but it's not on the same level of those albums. But those 6 albums are monumental. Now, at some point in the 90s, they decided to bring out a box set called The Great Deceiver. It was expensive, and back in the 90s I didn't really have much money back then, and most of my life being a musician, I didn't have much money, but I couldn't afford that set, that Great Deceiver box set. So I never got it, and it was always one of these things that I regretted. Okay, now a few years later I'm on holiday, and I've gone down to the beach. I'm not expecting to have any sort of a King Crimson experience and down on holiday at the beach. But when I'm walking around, my flip-flops, having a look around, there's a little bit of a market going on. There's a bloke selling some records, and I start leafing through it all. And there's the bloody box set for 10 quid. It was for 10 quid. And I didn't buy it. I ummed and ahed. When you and ah about something and you make the wrong decision, shall I get this or not? Well, have I got 10 quid on me? I did want to go and buy a hot dog, and if I can't have it, and it was like one of those decisions, I do want it though. And I can see myself now, 30 odd years ago, with trimming trunks, bloody t-shirt on, holding the Great Deceiver, and I want to go, Andrew, buy it, you great big idiot, buy it, because 30 years later you're going to remember it. You're going to say these are the albums you want, and in all your record buying, with all the thousands of albums you buy, you're going to zoom back to this time at this beach and go, why did you not buy the Great Deceiver bloody CD box set? Why didn't you buy it? I don't know. It's become an album that I want now. Every now and then I go onto eBay or Discogs, and it's pricey, you see. I could go and buy it. I could afford it now. It's there. But it's expensive, and it's rightfully expensive. Now, I don't know if I get this one, I'll be let down, because there's a part of me that likes the editing process of these jams into the albums, especially Starless of the Bible Black. I don't know whether it would ruin Starless of the Bible Black to find out that it was sort of created out of all the jams that we now see, a little bit like the Miles Davis box sets. They seemed brilliant at the time, and I bought all of those. I learned by my mistakes. So the Bitches Brew one, the Inner Silent Way one, I bought them all. When the On the Corner one came out, I didn't buy it, and that could nearly made my list. I think that's at number 11, is the On the Corner Miles Davis box set, especially as I sold my bloody copy of On the Corner. So I have nothing. I have no evidence of On the Corner in my record collection, and it's one of my favourite albums. What did you sell it for? I had an idea before the YouTube channel of raising some money by selling all my albums, and I sold one to a guy I used to work with. It was On the Corner, and as soon as I'd lost it, I regretted it straight off, and I didn't sell anymore. Right, so that's what I got. Number 8 is the Great Deceiver box set. At number 7, I got 2 albums. I didn't know which one to put up. I'll discuss this as we get there. But at number 7, I have got, let's get in the middle for this one and do some swanky computer graphics, shall we? I have got, by Larry Coryell, Barefoot Boy or Offering. I'm a huge Larry Coryell fan. Larry's a funny, he's a funny character in the world of jazz rock fusion, because he's one of the pioneers. He's the godfather of jazz rock fusion, and because he's so early to the game, and because he's such an interesting musician. Because Larry Coryell, what I love about him, he's not a perfectionist. He is much more interested in pushing himself into realms that are uncomfortable. So when he solos, he'll always push himself beyond himself. And in musically, what he does, he's got no fear. Some points he's jamming with John Coltrane's rhythm section, playing a sort of guitar version of Coltrane. And other times he's singing along whilst waltzing around with his kids and wife in the nude. All strange things that Larry Coryell does that you wouldn't get from Larry Carlton. And so I've got a lot of respect for Larry Coryell. And because of that, I've got a ton of Larry Coryell albums. He is my big sort of collectible musician now. If I'm out at the record fairs and I see a Larry Coryell album, I always buy it. Now, doing this channel and having all the 11th House stuff, I thought I've got the best stuff. The 11th House stuff is the best stuff, which is this fusion band he created in the 70s. Bit of a Mahavishnu copy band, but enough of a Larry Coryell genius band to be, really one of the. It's like they're number 4. You've got Mahavishnu and Weather Report, then you got Return to Forever, then coming in at number 4, you've got 11th House. You know, they are the sort of esoteric jazz rock fusion band for people who really know what they're talking about without having to resort to passports, right? So we've got that. I thought I had the best of Larry Coryell, got some of the early albums, got the acoustic albums. You don't need anything from the 1980s, right? That descent into alcohol and drug addiction is full of so many incredible albums. But I've got to be honest, once he came out of that, and then he tends to be in a much more sort of straight jazz style, and I never liked any of that. But there's some stuff there. I thought I had the best of it. I decided to rank him. These 2 albums are incredible. Barefoot Boy and Offering are Larry's masterpieces. There's a live album he did with a trio, which is like taking Hendrix's Band of Gypsies and directly channeling it into jazz rock fusion. That's a great album. But these ones, they just fly. And I think the promise of jazz rock fusion, what Larry Coryell was trying to get to before, is really it's really nailed on these albums. What do I mean by that? How do you combine the exploratory improvisational abandon that exists in jazz in a high-powered rock band? Weather Report tried to do it, the Mahavishnu Orchestra tried to do it, and they were all brilliant, but they're quite idiosyncratic in the way they did it. What Larry Coryell seems to do here is he understands Coltrane so well. And on these albums, they fly. They fly in a way where, that is, in a way that I think Tony Williams' Lifetime, they're seminal albums. Tony Williams' Lifetime albums are seminal. They're sort of more out there than the Mahavishnu Orchestra. These albums are even beyond, for me, the Tony Williams' Lifetime. Steve Marcus on soprano saxophone. Steve Marcus has ended up sat in the corner of the Buddy Rich band when I was a nipper, and I always thought he was an incredible player, but he was very, very important in the history of jazz rock fusion. His Tomorrow Never Knows, an album I do own, although it's a bit of a copy of it, it's not a real version of it, but Tomorrow Never Knows, that he did with Larry in the late 60s, is a very important early fusion album. But here it's all done. The drums are really out there and exploratory. There's enough of a rock feel and enough of a jazz feel. Steve Marcus' solos are great. The keyboard is great. I can't remember who he is on these albums. But Larry Coryell's guitar playing. And there's moments on here that are so shred-worthy. He shreds beyond McLaughlin on this. Right, just pouring out the sort of cascades of notes that we would associate a few years later with Alan Holdsworth. The guitar plays incredible. He goes towards free jazz. There's bits of bebop. There's country music in there, rock and roll, the blues. It's all in here. Larry Coryell really states his intent on these 2 albums. Barefoot Boy is no greater than Offering. Barefoot Boy has a little bit more abandon, but Offering has moments of abandon. The tracks really go on for a long time on Barefoot Boy. I think the final track is a whole side long. Offering is a little bit more concise, but it's just as out there. These are incredible fusion albums. They should be mentioned in the same breath as In a Mountain Flame or Emergency by Tony Williams' Lifetime. You know, they should be mentioned in that. So that's what I got at number 7, is Larry Coryell. Another pioneer of fusion that I thought I knew about. Recently I did a video where I listed 5 albums that I hadn't heard before, and I sort of showed my appreciation of them. And there was a Barry Miles album. I think I'll go back over it. There was a Barry Miles album on there that I really enjoyed. It was very acoustic-y, acoustic piano, I think double bass, electric guitar, drums. But it was incredible, and it had sort of a return to Weber complexity about it. Barry Miles, of course, being a sort of prodigy keyboardist. They emerged in the 1960s, making, you know, a whole host of different albums, and then starts to move towards jazz rock fusion at the end of the 60s, making a series of seminal fusion albums that have really been forgotten. Now, the early ones are really interesting, and I wish I could name them, but I can't here because obviously this is just coming out of this is just me talking, and I can't remember what it's called. But when I assessed all of these albums, right, The album and it was a viewer sent me a copy of Fusion Is, and when I saw it, I thought, oh my god, it's that album, it's that incredible Fusion album. But it wasn't. The album that I really want to own by Barry Miles is called Sky Train. This is blisteringly fast, funky, out there jazz rock fusion. It was recorded in the mid-70s, and Barry Miles, who is a pioneer, had been able to also learn from the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Herbie Hancock and all this stuff, and it's all fed into him. And he just produces an absolute masterpiece, an album that nobody seems to really know. There's some incredible guest appearances on this album as well. This is a seminal jazz rock fusion album. Barry Miles, Sky Train. We're at 20 minutes. I'm going to get a move on, so I'm going to move on. We're halfway, and I only wanted this to be half an hour. It'll be longer than that now. I'm waffling too much, so let's move on, shall we, Andy, to number 5. Right. European prog, Passport. Right. I got a couple of Passport albums. You know, that sort of, you know, what country? I don't even know what country Passport are from. Are they French or German or I haven't got a clue. Wolfgang Dornier, is that the guy? Right. Passport, I've listened to them, but it is like a European version of jazz rock, and I like that, you know, but you know, I haven't gone there, have I? You know, so many people go, what do you think of Japanese fusion? You know, yeah, Cassiopeia and all that is bloody brilliant. I love it. It's great, and I've heard albums that are really fantastic, and I'd love to own those albums, but they don't end up on my bloody most wanted. You got to be like absolutely sublime to end up on this list. There is one European prog band that has made an album that is utterly brilliant, funky, fiery, incredibly virtuoso, brilliantly recorded, brilliant. All the things we love, and this album challenges all the great albums. If you're a jazz rock fusion fan, you got to have this album, and I haven't got it. I've never even seen a copy of it. It's by a band called Il Baricentro. I assume they're, with the O on the end, I'm assuming they're an Italian band. Could be Spanish, but I'm assuming they're Italian. And they made an album called Sconcerto. These albums are all mind-blowing fusion albums, right? You've got to have them. You've got to own them. Where do I get this? I'm sure I could go on and find it. It's all bloody expensive, but yeah, this album is really something else. I know those of you who like new music, this is going to blow your mind, especially those of you who like fusion. You're going to be going and checking these albums out, and you're going to be like me, this is a curse. You've been cursed watching this video, should have watched it. And this is the worst thing. I come out here and talk about albums I haven't got, and it pushes the bloody price up. There's more of that in a minute, you know. So that's what I got. Number 5 is Sconcerto. Now, number 4 and number 3 are classic albums that you have to own, and I haven't got them, by major jazz rock musicians. At number 4, I have Flood by Herbie Hancock, which was originally only released, a live album by the Headhunters, released only in Japan. The cover's amazing. The cover is amazing. Right, look at that cover. That's bloody amazing. On here, we have the Headhunters, which is one of the greatest fusion bands of all time. Right, blowing on those tunes, and because it's live, brilliantly recorded, it's out there. Flood is one of the greatest fusion albums, not just obscure, full stop. Right, if you just want to own one Herbie Hancock album, right, you could have Headhunters, maybe Maiden Voyage. No, it's Flood. This is bloody classic fusion. I haven't got a copy of it. I can't believe it. If I die not owning a copy of Flood, then my life may well have been in vain. You may say, haven't you got a copy of it? It's amazing. I know it's amazing. People know this album is amazing. Is it? You know, put it in the comments. This is Herbie's greatest album, isn't it? Basically, this is Herbie's greatest album, isn't it? What's better than this? Don't come up with all that 60s bloody, you know, Miles Davis quintet adjacent albums. They're brilliant albums. It's not like this, though. They ain't funky. They're not funky. They haven't got Bernie Maupin doing his incredible saxophone playing, Mike Clark doing an incredible funky sort of his own Elvin Jones stroke Dave Garibaldi approach to the funk. It's bloody ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And Paul Jackson Jr., the greatest bass player that ever lived. The greatest of all time, my favourite bass player. Why haven't I got this album? What could be above this on the list, I hear you ask? I'll tell you. At number 3, this is embarrassing. At number 3, I've got Emergency by Tony Williams Lifetime. I can hear the jeers from here. Andy, you haven't got a copy of Emergency? One of the most seminal, groundbreaking, what's that stone that you have in the middle of the arch that keeps it all in, you know, stops the arch from falling down, you know? What's that stone called? You know that type of stone? That's what Emergency is. In the fusion arch, Emergency is that stone. I haven't got a copy of bloody Emergency. I can go and get it on CD. But, and then it will be, you know, they've remastered it because it sounds bloody awful, right? But I've got to be honest, I want it on vinyl and I want the shit 70s mix. In fact, I think that could be improved by just mixing it with even more distortion on, because that's what you want with Emergency. None of this bloody neatening it up, making it sound all nice. No, no, no. So I want the vinyl version. They're bloody expensive. Now, the thing I don't understand with Tony Williams, like, how have you got by like this? I'll tell you why. Because when I was a kid and I wanted a Tony Williams Lifetime album, I went down to London to Tower Records, because that was the only place in the UK that I could have got a Tony Williams Lifetime. And I went in and they had a double album called Once in a Lifetime, and I bought that. It had virtually got every track on Emergency and some of the best tracks on top of that from Turn It Over. So I didn't differentiate between this, and this album had the Emergency stuff on, but it also had the Jack Bruce stuff on. Now, what I don't understand is Turn It Over to me is as great as Emergency is. I think it's just as great. When Jack Bruce comes in, he ups the ante. Emergency is great for what it is. When Jack Bruce comes in, we really are moving towards a blueprint of jazz rock. But of course, this is far out there played with John McLaughlin. I've got virtually everything by John McLaughlin. I do not own Emergency or Turn It Over. They're both there now. I haven't got either of them now. I was in a record fair the other day and it said special offers. So I'm going through, they're all £5 each. They're £5 each. And I come across it, Turn It Over. It's £45. I should have bought it, really. I didn't. I thought it was too expensive. That's my problem, you see. Now I'm regretting that. And then worse than that, the Vinyl Vulture is off in bloody some far off country with Coldplay, pretend to be Chris Martin, and he's going around all these great big record shops, and he gets for a reasonable price Turn It Over. So the Vinyl Vulture now has a Tony Williams Lifetime album, and I don't own an actual original Tony Williams Lifetime. I don't want them on CD. Well, I'd like them on CD. I haven't got them on CD, but these are ones I've got to own on vinyl. That's the bottom line. So nuts what I've got at number 3. What could be higher than this? Well, there was a time where I would have said my number 1 album I want on vinyl is Exhibition by John Serry Jr. What the hell's that, Andy? This is one of the greatest jazz rock fusion albums ever made. Made at the end of the 70s. Imagine taking that sort of Fuzaki David Sanborn sound, but then morphing it with a composition approach which is like Frank Zappa. Right, and then imbuing it with some of the greatest jazz fusion musicians of all time and solos that are just on fire. And that's what we have with Exhibition by John Serry Jr. And eventually on eBay I found it for a reasonable enough price and I bought it, and I now own a copy of Exhibition by John Serry Jr. You'd think I'd be happy, but the trouble is there's another one that is equally as good. It's the album that came out after that, and it's called Jazz Is. And this has got Peter Erskine on drums. And I would like to think that Exhibition's a little bit better. And I did for, you know, I thought, and the reason is because the production's a little bit drier. This one's a little bit more roomier, 80s reverby. It makes no difference. This album is also monumental. I put it up so high because John Serry Jr. really is the unsung genius of jazz rock fusion. He really is. There's a whole bunch of them. Barry Miles is one. So is John Serry Jr. This album, I've got to get a copy of it. I really want a copy of it. but it's not number one. What's number one on my most wanted? You're not going to believe this. It's the only real album by this artist, and I don't own a copy. I want it on CD or vinyl. I don't care. I just need to have a copy of it. It is the self-titled album, the debut album, and the only album by Herman Szobel. If you don't know who Herman Szobel is, I will now tell you a story of such unmitigated wonder and intrigue that you will not believe it's true. But I tell you, viewers, this story is absolutely true. Those of you who've watched this channel for a while will remember the whole journey through the whole Herman Szobel story. But for some new viewers, the ones who've come from Beato, you may not know anything about this. Herman Szobel's only album is a major label album release on Arista Records, and it is a cross between prog, jazz rock fusion, and is somewhere between John Coltrane, Frank Zappa and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but with a sound all of its own that you will never hear anywhere else. It's one of the most unique, mind-blowing albums ever made in the history of mankind. When I discovered this album, I thought, what the hell is this? And it instantly became one of my favourite albums of all time. And it is one of my favourite albums of all time. I could go as far to say that this could easily end up in my top 3 albums of all time. But I don't own a copy of it. And I'll tell you why. Herman Szobel is a strange character, let us say. I will now tell you the story of Herman Szobel. So if you could make yourself comfortable, I'll get rid of that now. We'll get rid of him so I can sit here and tell you the story of Herman Szobel. Herman Szobel was an Austrian teenager in the mid-70s. His claim to fame at the time was his uncle was Bill Graham, the guy that used to put the gigs on at Fillmore, East and West. But he hasn't really grown up in contact with Uncle Bill. He lives out in Austria. Now, he's a musician. He plays piano and he composes. So at the age of 17, he gets on a ship, I assume, unannounced, could have been a plane, and he arrives in New York and he looks up Uncle Bill. And he starts hanging out with Uncle Bill, and Uncle Bill decides to take his nephew and show him the sights, the musical sights of New York at that time. And they take him down to a session by Roberta Flack where she's recording Feel Like Making Love. This is quite a legendary event to be involved in. So this young kid comes in and he's watching the session, and the band and Roberta sort of turn around and they say, you know, who are you? And he goes, I'm Herman, my uncle is Bill Graham, my name's Herman Szobel. And they're saying, and what do you do? And he said, I am the greatest pianist in the world. They all burst out laughing. And so they coax him over to the piano and he sits down and plays it, and it turns out that he could well be right. So bowled over they are by this kid's talent that they all go to Arista Records, a major label, and Arista hand out a budget for Herman Szobel to make his masterpiece, which he sets about doing. And he puts together a band. But not only does he put this band together, he then gets them to decamp Captain Beefheart style in some practice room with some camp beds down or something. And they have to live for a year this life learning Herman Szobel's incredibly complex compositions, which after a year or so that they can play like lightning. The band goes into the studio and pretty much records this album live. It's absolutely incredible. But Arista have put all their money into an album which they probably hoped would be a little bit commercial. Its brilliance is it's not commercial, it's completely uncompromising. The album came out and it was not a success. And that's where the story gets weird. Because Herman Szobel seemed to not be able to deal with the fact that the world hadn't turned round and acknowledge the fact that he was a musical genius. And in that, a sort of megalomania seemed to emerge with Herman Szobel. They tried to make a second album. Some of those recordings are on the internet you can listen to. They're quite incredible. But very quickly, he sort of descended into this sort of narcissistic hell, right? Acting more and more erratically until in the early 1980s, he disappears off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. By 1981-82, his mother has registered him as a missing person, and he becomes a missing person. This album falls into obscurity. A few people know of its genius, but it ends up in the sort of bargain bins by the end of the 1970s, early 80s, and it floats off into obscurity. All right, waiting for the internet to discover its treasures, which it does many decades later, 30, 40 years later, 50 years really. He's still, you know, what's happened to him? He's probably died. Then it gets even stranger. A documentary filmmaker goes over to Jerusalem to explore a thing called, I think it's called the Jerusalem syndrome, where people go to Jerusalem and they think that they're Jesus Christ. And she interviews a whole host of weird and wonderful people in Jerusalem. And one of the persons that they interview won't allow their face to be shown. They're living in a cave in rainwater. And they say they were once a musician and they had some sort of success in the 70s. They talk about this. When the documentary comes out, of course, this documentary filmmaker has no idea who Herman Szobel is. But people in the know start to go, I think this is Herman Szobel. So there is this whispers that he's ended up in a cave drinking rainwater. Right, this is all we've got on the bloke. Me being in this position of exploring this music, it's an album that gets suggested for me to have a listen to. As I said, I listen to it, it blows me away. I cannot believe how good this is. So I do a video about it. It creates some interest. And there's more questions that have unanswered. I can't give people enough information, so I start to do the research. Everybody involved in that album is dead. They're all dead. The whole band's dead. The only person that is alive is Herman Szobel, if he's alive, and the bass player, Michael Viseglia. Now, Michael Viseglia went on to become the bass player with Suzanne Vega, and he played on such hit records as My Name is Luca. You know that one? So this guy's a really well-known, renowned bass player. I thought he won't talk to me, he's quite well known. So I sent him a message and said, I don't want to talk to you about Suzanne Vega, I appreciate your work. I'm really interested in this album he did with Herman Szobel. Mr. Viseglia straight away, yeah, I've got to talk about this. And I ended up doing 2 interviews with Michael Viseglia. One, which was about the album, and he was able to set a whole bunch of things to rights. And secondly, about his own career, which was fascinating. So, I have a friend called Ken Golden who runs a distribution and record company called Laser's Edge out in America. Knowing that this album was so great, he'd spent his own money to press up 2,000 copies that I think were probably sat in his garage or wherever he started. They'll have a proper place to have. But he's got these 2,000 copies. I bring the video out and the album starts to sell. Now, when I did that video, I could have gone and picked up this album, you know, off Discogs for probably £7 or £8. You can't now. I got Herman Szobel's name out there and I pushed up the price of that album to a point where I can't afford to buy a copy of it now. That's the irony of this. I haven't got a copy of this album. Not only is it one of my favourite albums, that I played my own part in the story of this album. Did you really, Andy, or did you just, you know, just tell people about it? Well, no. Because a couple of years ago, I get a message from Michael Viseglia, and he says, you're not going to believe this, because of your video, Herman Szobel has come out of hiding. I know. He came out of hiding. He made contact with Michael Viseglia. He travelled out to New York, and I believe that they did go into a studio and do some recordings. What's happened to these recordings? What was happening? What went on? I spoke to Michael about it, but everyone seems a little bit reticent to really talk about it. I don't know why. Obviously, Mr. Szobel had a hard life. And I don't know if that played a part. These recordings were very abstract. Now, you know that my ultimate favourite album is Visions of the Emerald Beyond. And I know some of the guys in that. The late, great Bob Knapp passed away a few weeks ago, days ago really, which is really sad. And another couple of musicians on that album are Philip Hershey and Premick Russell Tubbs. So he's an incredible saxophone player. If you want to hear Premick Russell Tubbs really playing, Go and check out the Swing of Delight album by Carlos Santana. He's on there. He's wonderful, playing with the Miles Davis quintet, classic 60s quintet. Incredible player. Well, apparently he also got pulled in to play on this Herman Szobel album. So Premic... I'm getting confused. Premic Russell Tubbs, you played on. I can't quite get my head around this. I don't think. I was just thinking, was it Philip Hershey that played Chiller? No, it was definitely Premic Russell Tubbs. I doubted myself. I'm doubting myself now, Andy. You get to the end of this video. What was that recording? What's going on? And most importantly, now I'm going to look straight into the camera. I know I'm usually looking at my picture up here, and I don't look. I'm going to look straight. Herman Szobel. If you are watching this, right, my email is in the description of this video. Now, if you don't have an email, maybe a friend showing you this video, I think your album's a masterpiece, and I am 100% here to keep pushing this album until the world realizes it's a masterpiece. I know my music. I know what's going on. This is absolutely incredible. And all these incredible albums I've covered on this list, they're not like your album, because that unique process you put the band through, I can hear it on the album. There's an internal confidence and fire on that album where your compositions absolutely come alive by musicians that aren't just playing the session game, but have lived that album. And it has a sound unlike any other album. So Mr. Szobel, if you're watching this, you know, if you haven't got an email, go to a friend of yours or somebody and email me, please, so we can make contact. I don't want you to come on the channel. I don't want anything. All I want is some contact with you. So if in future you want to utilize me in this story, we can do that. But I don't own a copy of it. And that is my #1 most wanted album. You weren't expecting a story like that at the end, were you? Those of you who knew it, you already probably go, we knew all this, Andy. But those of you who don't, I hope there's a few people now who are going over to Spotify, because it's on there, or going to YouTube, and they're about to put this Herman Szobel album on. This is going to change your life. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.